I'm Jasmine Carter, 35 years old, and the Chief Financial Officer at one of the top investment firms in San Diego. I've been on the cover of finance magazines, invited to speak at global market strategy conferences, and honored as one of the industry's top 40 under 40. But none of those achievements, no matter how proud others might be, could ever touch the heart of one person: my father. He's William Carter, the founder and CEO of Carter Properties, a real estate empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars, known for its high-end coastal resorts across California. To him, everything could be measured in numbers: net worth, ROI, deal closings, investor praise. As for affection, emotional connection, those were luxuries he only indulged in when there was nothing more productive to do. Since I was a child, I'd learned one simple truth: love in the Carter household didn't come in hugs or compliments. If it came at all, it came through outshining everyone else. And even then, recognition was never guaranteed. I still remember the first time I brought home a certificate for being top student in the entire state. I was 11. I thought that day would be special. But instead of praise, he looked up from his laptop for 3 seconds, glanced at me and said, "You should have earned the STEM scholarship from the beginning. It's not about reaching the top, it's about staying there." Then he turned back to his email. That was the last time I brought a certificate home. My mother, Laura, was a gentle woman who had once been an elementary school teacher before quitting to care for the family. But in front of my father, she was like a shadow. Always smiling at the right moments, always standing quietly behind him at every event. When I asked her why she never defended me when he went too far, she would only whisper, "He's strict because he wants the best for you." No, he was strict because he didn't know how to love. We lived in a sleek oceanfront villa in La Jolla, where every wall was lined with awards and certificates, but not a single family photo. I had an older brother named Brandon, the one my father proudly called the perfect heir. Brandon was his carbon copy, assertive, cold-eyed, always knowing just what to say to win him over. I, on the other hand, was too emotional, as he often said. I loved novels, once dreamed of becoming a writer, and had the audacity to decline working at his company after graduation. Instead, I carved my own path, starting as a junior analyst at a finance firm, slowly climbing up without leveraging a single family connection. I used to believe if I surpassed Brandon, he would see me differently, that he'd stop calling me the stubborn one every time I challenged him, that he'd stop introducing me as the one in finance or something outside our field. I thought if I reached a big enough milestone, a major award, a billion-dollar deal, he'd look at me just once and say, "I'm proud of you." But when I was 33, after being nominated as Finance Leader of the Year and appearing on national television, he sent a single text: "Will that help you buy more real estate?" That was the moment I understood I could reach any height, but to him I'd always be the outsider to the family race. When I was little, I used to think our home was the best place in the world. A cream-colored mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in Newport Beach, with a saltwater pool, private tennis court, and a large balcony overlooking the ocean. Our neighbors were doctors, lawyers, company founders, and their kids, like me and my siblings, attended the most prestigious private schools. I didn't know that this so-called perfection was only a glossy shell hiding deep fractures. My brother, Chase Carter, was 4 years older than me, and since the age of 10, he had been groomed to take over the business. My father took him to meetings, taught him to read zoning maps, and made him watch CNN Business instead of cartoons. I once saw Chase sit in Dad's office for hours learning to negotiate contracts before he could even write full sentences. Every time Chase got an A, Dad invited friends over for dinner, raised his wine glass, and declared, "My son's getting job offers before he even finishes high school." I used to look at Dad like he was a mountain, immovable, cold, and think, if I climb high enough, he'll see me. But no matter how far I climbed, he never did. The only person who brought a little warmth into our house was Alyssa, my younger sister. 2 years younger than me, petite, gentle, and emotionally intuitive. She always knew when to stay silent, when to hold Dad's hand, when to lower her head and say, "You're right, Dad." I used to admire her. Later, I realized she didn't have a choice. Every Thanksgiving or Christmas, I felt invisible in my own home. People asked about Chase's latest achievements, about the speech Elisa wrote for the school concert, but no one asked how I was, what I liked, or if I had anything to share. One time, I got a perfect score on the statewide math exam. When I showed the certificate to Dad, he just asked, "How many people got that score?" I said, "Only 4 in the entire state." He nodded, then placed the paper on the table like an expired coupon. No praise, not even a glance. I tried everything to get his attention. I learned to draw, played violin, won writing awards, but all I got was his signature line, "That kind of stuff won't feed anyone. You should learn how to invest in land." When I was 16, Dad took Chase on a 2-week trip to Europe. A business mindset development journey, he called it. I wasn't allowed to go because girls are just a burden on trips. Mom didn't intervene. That night, Elisa quietly came into my room and slipped a handwritten note under my pillow. "You don't have to beat them. You just have to beat yourself." I've kept that note to this day. But the moment that stayed with me most was during junior year. I overheard a conversation behind a closed door. Dad was meeting with a real estate partner from Dallas. When the man asked about his children, Dad said, "Chase, of course, speaks for himself. Little Elisa is sweet and obedient. The middle one? Jasmine. Yeah, she's a bit headstrong, smart, but the kind of smart you can't control." Yeah. That was the first time I felt what it meant to be defined by someone who refused to change how they saw you. I didn't cry out of hurt. I cried out of despair. Through high school and college, I learned to hide every real emotion. I stopped waiting for him to notice me. I began journaling instead of confiding in my mother. I found scholarships on my own, worked part-time jobs, and saved every cent for the day I could leave that house. On the outside, we still looked like the perfect family. But behind that polished oak door was a silent power structure, where love was weighed like assets, where the weaker ones learned silence, and those who wouldn't bow were strangers in their own home. And I, Jasmine Carter, the difficult daughter, the uncontrollable, once swore I'd never let myself be boxed into that title again. I wouldn't live to earn his love. I would live to make sure he could never ignore my presence. I left home on a morning in August before the sun had fully risen over Newport Beach. No one saw me off. Mom was at her early yoga class. Dad had gone to meet a client at 5 a.m. Alyssa texted me, "Good luck," but couldn't come back from summer classes at UC Berkeley. I stuffed my old Samsonite suitcase into the trunk of an Uber and looked back at the house one last time. A part of me still hoped Dad would call, say something, anything, but the phone stayed silent. I chose Chicago over New York, a city big enough to challenge me but far enough to escape his shadow. I got into a summer internship at Whitmore Capital, a mid-sized private equity firm. I started at the bottom, reserve analyst. The office was in a glass tower in the financial district, cold, cutthroat, where every report could make or break your future. I was 23, no connections, no privileges, no Carter name to open doors. But I had one thing: survival discipline, the kind only kids raised in homes without applause can truly understand. I went to work at 7 a.m. and usually left the office after 10 p.m. I learned to read balance sheets like detective novels, spotting holes, identifying red flags. I wrote down every word my boss said in meetings, practiced replying to emails like I was playing chess. I knew I couldn't afford mistakes because no one would catch me if I fell. The first year, I stayed silent. The second year, I started speaking up. By the third year, I was promoted to lead the venture investment team for the Midwest, an unprecedented achievement for someone not yet 26. When I called home with the news, my mom excitedly said, "Your father will be so proud." I smiled faintly. He still thinks investing in startups is just burning money on risky games. Truth is, he never even called. 3 years later, a partner from Wendell Roth & Co., a global investment firm, invited me to New York. That offer felt like a golden ticket into the big leagues, where nine-figure deals were discussed in elevator rides. I said yes, without hesitation. Not for the money, but because my instincts told me I was ready. At Wendell, I was no longer the promising young woman. I became Jasmine Carter, the architect of the $2,400,000,000 0 cents clean energy market restructuring. I led a team of over 30, rebuilt the firm's risk assessment model from scratch, and personally signed off on a strategic plan that saved the company from a near concession during last year's volatile market swing. Screen. Then, at 35, I was named Chief Investment Strategist, the youngest and first white woman in the firm's 62-year history to hold that position. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply pulled out my phone, stared at the contact name, Dad, then locked the screen. That evening, I walked home through Bryant Park, wind sweeping in from the Hudson River. New York at night isn't gentle. It reminded me that everything I had today came from years of forging my path alone, without a safety net. I called Elisa. "I got the appointment," I said, trying to sound casual. There was silence on the line, then she burst into tears. "You really did it. I knew you would. But Jasmine, are you going to tell Dad?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked up at the sky, where the city lights blinked like stars, and wondered, if someone never wanted to see you shine, do you still need their eyes on you? Maybe I didn't know the answer then, but I knew one thing. I was no longer Jasmine Carter, the girl they called hard to manage. I was Jasmine Carter, someone even those who underestimated me now mentioned with caution. I'd never been the flashy type. Even with a 7-figure salary, I still lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, commuted by subway, and only bought Starbucks on days I really needed motivation. But this year, I did something different. I spent almost my entire Q1 bonus on a Mercedes-Maybach S580, fully loaded, massage seats, starlight ceiling, Italian leather interior, the exact model my father once mentioned at a La Jolla Golf Club cocktail party. That car's the pinnacle of success, but you should only buy it if you truly deserve it. I thought, if he saw that as the symbol of success, then I'd give it to him, as proof I'd arrived. I scheduled the car's delivery from New York to his house in Newport Beach, timed exactly for Father's Day Sunday, with a simple card attached. "Thank you for teaching me to be strong, Jasmine." I even flew back to California that Saturday night, booking a hotel less than 10 minutes from the house. I didn't tell him, wanted it to be a surprise, and maybe, deep down, still held that childish hope. He'd smile, open his arms, and for the first time in my life, call me his pride. That Sunday, I arrived at 10 a.m. Mom answered the door, surprised but still warm as always. She said Dad was getting ready for lunch with his golf buddies, but I could wait in the front yard. When I handed him the box with the smart key, he glanced at it and frowned. "What's this?" I led him to the front door. The sleek black Maybach was parked in the driveway, sunlight bouncing off the chrome trim like blades of light. He stood still for 5 seconds, then turned to me, his expression part puzzled, part suspicious. "What are you planning to do with this car?" "I'm not planning anything," I smiled. "I bought it for you, for Father's Day." He took the key, flipping it back and forth in his hand like it was a foreign toy he wasn't sure belonged to him. Then he exhaled. "This thing definitely isn't cheap." I nodded. "I think you should have spent that money on something more practical. Cars are just liabilities." Then he stepped closer to the vehicle, his hand brushing along the hood. "Still impressive." "No hug, no thank you." 10 minutes later he drove off, saying he'd test it out before lunch. I stood there, sunlight warming my shoulders while my chest felt like winter hadn't ended. That afternoon, back at my hotel, I got a message from an old acquaintance, a friend of my father's, through LinkedIn. Saw Mr. Williams showing off his new Maybach at the yacht club. Everyone thought he'd just landed a massive deal with some firm in Asia. I stared at the message, heart sinking like a stone. I didn't expect gratitude, but I didn't expect the gift I'd bought with real money, real effort, to be paraded as his solo achievement, without a single mention of who gave it. The next day, I flew back to New York. My suitcase was light, but my heart was heavy. I couldn't sleep on the plane. I kept replaying his expression when he took the keys. Not joy, not emotion, just calculation, as if assessing the value of an object, not a daughter's gesture. That's when I finally understood. He never needed me to succeed. He only needed me not to disrupt his power dynamic. And the gift I gave him, even if it cost more than most people make in a year, was just another ornament he could exploit, as long as no one knew it came from me. I used to think nothing in my life could shock me anymore. That after 35 years in a family like mine, where affection was rationed like a balance sheet, where cold was a generous description of my father, nothing could make me feel like a lost child again. Until I got the email from GeneLink, the genetic testing service I signed up for, just out of curiosity about my European ancestry. The subject line read, "Your results are ready and may require review." I clicked the link while waiting for my coffee at my favorite cafe on Fifth Avenue. I was just curious to see if I had Irish ancestry, like Mom once said. The results popped up in a few seconds. Nothing stood out until the last line. Your reported paternal DNA does not match your biological profile. I reread it once, then twice more. My blood felt like it froze, drop by drop. A hollow, dizzying feeling washed over me. The kind only those who've seen their whole belief system collapse in a single sentence would understand. I couldn't grasp it, couldn't believe it, couldn't accept it. My father wasn't my biological father. I double-checked the account info. Everything matched. Name, birth date, sample ID. I even called customer support, hoping it was some system error. But the agent, in a calm, professional tone, confirmed the DNA sample was valid and that my results were a perfect match with my mother's. There was no genetic link to Richard Carter. For the next 24 hours, I said nothing. No texts, no calls. I just floated between two worlds, the one I thought I knew and the one I had just stepped into, where I was a stranger in my own family. I called Alyssa, almost told her, but I stayed quiet. She didn't deserve to be dragged into chaos, not until I was sure. I needed certainty. I needed irrefutable proof. I flew back to California again, telling my parents I had a client meeting in Los Angeles and wanted to stop by. While Dad was on a call in his study, I quietly slipped into the master bathroom and took his old toothbrush. I wrapped it carefully and shipped it straight to an independent DNA lab in San Jose. 10 days later, the results arrived. No biological relationship, no genetic match, nothing at all. This time, I didn't freeze. All I felt was the slow burn of anger, like lava running under calm soil. Years of enduring his cold stares, his words that stabbed like needles without drawing blood. All those times I pushed myself, just to be called daughter with pride rather than reluctance. And now I knew I was never his daughter. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because in his eyes I never belonged to him. I slipped the DNA results into a brown envelope and tucked it into my purse. I carried it like a live grenade, unsure if I'd ever pull the pin. Would I hand it over? Reveal it? Burn it? I didn't know. I only knew I wasn't the same person anymore. Now, every word he'd said to me for over 30 years, from "you should be more practical" to "stop trying so hard to prove something," felt like a scar with a name. I started seeing every smile he gave Chase, every nod of approval toward Elisa, through a new lens, and realized I never had a chance because I was never even in the same race. I sat in my midtown hotel room, staring at the envelope on the table like it was a door cracked open. And I knew The truth doesn't disappear just because you pretend it never happened. The Carter family gathering was always held on the last Saturday of June, my father's birthday, and close to Father's Day. Mom still called it our traditional anniversary dinner. A formal evening where extended relatives, business associates, and old friends gathered at the Newport Beach estate, sipping Napa wine, eating lobster, and listening to Dad deliver a speech like a head of state. I had never skipped a single year. Even though every visit made me feel like an invisible extra on a stage, no one noticed. But this year was different. This year, I walked into that house with a brown envelope in my purse and a calm I had never known before. The Mercedes I bought was still parked at the front driveway, polished to the point it reflected like a mirror. I realized he had intentionally kept it in the most visible spot, his newest trophy to impress the guests. The crowd had mostly arrived. Chase came with his wife and 2 kids, hugging Dad like a scene from a bank commercial. Alyssa wore a tasteful beige dress and walked beside her new boyfriend, a heart surgeon. I, as usual, was introduced by Mom with a brief mention. Jasmine's still working in finance in New York, super busy, but thank goodness she made it this year. No one asked what I was doing or what I'd achieved, not a single one. Around 8 p.m., after dessert, my father stood up with a glass of wine. His voice was deep, clear, and as practiced as a politician's. I'm deeply grateful to be here tonight, reflecting not just on my own journey, but on the legacy carried forward by my children. The next generation of Carter excellence. He turned to Chase, raising his glass. My son Chase has elevated Carter Properties with the recent expansion into the Lake Tahoe resort market. A true visionary. Applause followed. A few guests nodded in admiration. Then he looked at Elisa. And Elisa. Graceful, intelligent, contributing to the community through her hospital work and charitable initiatives. Your mother and I are so proud. More applause. I sat still, gripping my water glass tighter. He paused, eyes sweeping across the table, then landing on me. And lastly, Jasmine. I lifted my head, looking him dead in the eye. Success on paper doesn't always mean real success. Some people spend their whole lives trying to prove something, forgetting that respect can't be bought with paychecks or luxury cars. The table went silent. 1 second. 2 seconds. He raised his glass and smiled. I'm proud of all my children, except the one who still hasn't learned that family is about sacrifice, not a stage for self-expression. No one spoke, only the faint clink of silverware on china. I set down my glass and slowly stood up. All eyes turned to me, but this time, I didn't flinch. I pulled the brown envelope from my purse and walked toward the head table, where he sat like a king, rewriting history to suit himself. I placed the envelope in front of him. You're right. True success doesn't come from what can be bought. But it doesn't come from hollow speeches or performance over dinner either. I opened the envelope, pulled out the paper, and held it up. This is a DNA test result, conducted using a sample of Dad's hair. No one breathed. I looked around, eyes scanning the faces of relatives, people who were far too used to seeing me as different. And it confirms one thing. I'm not William Carter's biological daughter. Whispers erupted. My mother's hand trembled as she set down her napkin. Alyssa covered her mouth. Chase stood up abruptly, his face flushed. I turned back to him. I'm not a failure, I just don't belong to you, and maybe you never truly wanted me to belong to this family. I placed the paper on the table, neatly, like a verdict that needed no jury. I hope you continue to take pride in what you actually created. Then I turned and walked away. No tears, no rage. Leaving that house for the first time with no hope left inside me. I walked out of the Carter estate amid vague murmurs behind me. The large glass doors remained open, casting light from the dining room down the hallway, stretching my shadow across the marble floor like a fading trace of memory. In my hand was nothing but a small leather clutch, holding a chipped lipstick and a DNA test result. no longer a secret. The Mercedes-Maybach S580 stood tall at the driveway. Still glossy, still luxurious like the first time I saw it in a Manhattan showroom. But now, it wasn't a symbol of redemption or a desperate bridge to a father who never truly accepted me. Now, it was a symbol of returning to myself. I unlocked the car with the spare key I had never returned. The seat was still warm from when my father had driven it, a faint trace of silent possession. I started the engine. It was so quiet I could barely hear it. But I felt it. I was leaving. Not escaping, but freeing myself. I turned the car around across the manicured lawn and rows of towering palm trees I once sat under as a little girl, dreaming of being seen by my dad. That dream had now dissolved into the night, replaced by a quiet awakening. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. No need. Because that past, I had lived in it long enough to know I didn't owe it another second. As the wheels rolled past the estate gates, I saw my father appear on the front steps, holding the test results. He didn't call my name, didn't run after me. He just stood there, frozen, like a monument of power newly fractured. All my life, I had waited for him to speak. Now, I hoped, he would stay silent forever. I drove along the Pacific Coast Highway. Newport's night was still. The wind from the ocean carried salt. The rows of streetlights passed by like heartbeats settling after a shock. I'd pulled into an empty parking lot across from Crystal Cove Beach, turned off the engine, sat there. Not thinking, not analyzing, not interpreting, just breathing. What filled me wasn't sadness. It was a fresh emptiness, once crowded with expectations, fear, and the craving for validation. Now, it was fertile soil for a life that didn't need permission to exist. I opened my phone, launched my banking app. The car sale transfer had already been arranged, just needed confirmation. The buyer was a businessman in Beverly Hills. The funds hit my account instantly. I smiled. The car that was once a gift for my father was now an investment in myself, a real, emotional stop-loss. I called Alyssa. After 2 rings, she picked up. Jasmine, I just got out of the room. Is it true? I looked up at the starless sky. It's true, and I'm okay. For the first time in my life, I'm truly okay. She was quiet, then whispered, "Do you want me to come over?" I shook my head, though she couldn't see. "No, I just need you to know one thing. From now on, I live for me. I'm done chasing anyone." On the other end, I heard a soft, muffled sob. Then Alyssa said, "I've always believed you deserved a life you didn't have to ask permission for." I ended the call, but her words echoed in my mind. I didn't go back to the hotel. I drove straight toward Los Angeles, to the short-term apartment I had rented for this business trip, and slept the longest, deepest sleep of my life. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and booked a flight back to New York. No one saw me off. No one asked me to stay. And I didn't feel sorry. Because for the first time, I knew I was moving forward, not running away. When I landed back in New York the next morning, my phone had over 30 missed calls. The first was from Brandon, my brother. His message was only one line. "What the hell did you do? Dad is furious. Don't think this is over." Right after that came an email from William Carter's attorney. A short, cold document requesting I return the asset, referring to the Mercedes, and cease disseminating false information that may damage personal and corporate reputation. I smirked at the word false. The DNA test was still in my bag. Not a feeling, not an accusation, but science, undeniable. But what really shook me was a voice message from my mother, sent at 3 a.m. "Jasmine, you found out, didn't you? I'm sorry. I never thought it would end like this. Please, let things cool down. We can talk, just the two of us." Her voice was hoarse, broken, like she was swallowing back tears. I didn't respond right away, not out of anger, but because I wasn't ready to forgive what still hid in the shadows. In the end, Alyssa was the only one I answered. "Are you okay?" she asked as soon as I said, "Alyssa, it's me." Her voice was shaky, as if she had been the one thrown out of a pretend world. "Things at home are chaotic." Dad smashed his wine glass, called the lawyer in the middle of the night. Brandon said, "You're humiliating the whole family." Mom, she locked herself in her room, hasn't eaten since yesterday. I closed my eyes, resting my head against the car window as it drove me from the airport to my apartment. "And how about you?" I asked. There was a brief silence, then she quietly replied, "I feel relieved, because finally someone said what the whole family has been avoiding for 3 decades. I gripped the phone tighter. "Do you believe me?" "I've always believed you," Elisa said firmly. "Even when I was little and saw you get scolded for questioning Dad. Even when you left home and built a life with no one backing you." Then her voice dropped. "But Jasmine, I think Dad always knew. I never saw him look at you the way he looked at Brandon or me. That look, it was missing something fundamental, like you were someone he never wanted to claim as his own." I didn't say anything. That sentence, from my own sister, confirmed what I'd sensed my entire life, but never dared admit. The truth is, I never had a fair chance from the moment I was born. After the call, I sat quietly, not touching the food waiting for me. I let myself feel everything, the pain, the anger, the exhaustion, and then the weight lifted. Because for the first time, I didn't have to play the ungrateful daughter anymore. I opened my laptop and wrote a short email to my father's legal representative. "I'm not spreading false information, I'm simply stating the truth. The car has been sold and the funds were used lawfully. If you wish to pursue this, I'll release the full DNA data along with a detailed financial record of everything I've paid for this family over the past 10 years. I hit send without hesitation. Then, I opened my browser and logged into the company intranet. Joined a meeting with our Tokyo investment team, reviewed the quarterly report from Singapore, and submitted a sustainable partnership proposal to our Swiss partners. My world kept moving, not because of who I was related to, but because of who I am. By the end of the day, I received another email. The sender, a name I didn't recognize. Subject, gene link match confirmed, potential biological father found. I opened it, my heart skipping a beat as I read the first line. "Hi, Jasmine. I don't really know where to start, but it looks like I might be who you're looking for." 3 days after the family dinner, I received a message from my mom. Not a call, not an email. Just a simple line, sent around midnight. "I want to see you. Alone, no excuses, just the truth." I read the message over and over before typing a single reply. "Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Perry Street Cafe." June and Hazel was a small place, tucked into West Village, with bare brick walls and sunny glass windows. I chose a corner table by the window and ordered a mint tea. Mom arrived 10 minutes late. She wore no makeup. Her hair was down, a few silver strands showing. In the soft afternoon light, she looked smaller than I remembered. No small talk, no "how have you been?" She set her purse down, pulled out a thin envelope, and placed it between us. "This is a copy of your original birth certificate. The one your father, well, my husband, never knew existed." I looked at her. She looked back. No hesitation. "Your biological father," she said softly, "is Jonathan Hale. We met in our last year of college. I was studying psychology, and he was in information systems at Stanford. He was smart, kind, and broke. Conception and all too quick apprehension." I said nothing, listening as though hearing an old cassette tape I'd never been allowed to play. When I found out I was pregnant, I was going to tell him, but before I could, your grandparents, my parents, intervened. They said, "You can't throw away your future for a man with nothing." They pressured me, threatened to cut me off financially, and pushed me to meet William Carter, already a well-known name in real estate back then. I frowned. "And you agreed to marry him just because of the pressure?" "Not entirely." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "I was 19, alone, pregnant and cornered. William said he would marry me, raise the child as his own, as long as the past was buried. I said nothing. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm, like when negotiating a multi-million-dollar deal. He knew I wasn't his? I asked slowly. She nodded. He knew. From the beginning. But he thought he could mold you into the image he wanted. Until you started growing up and looking more and more like Jonathan. Not just the eyes, but the way you never accepted things just because someone told you to. I let out a dry laugh. And you let him punish me for 30-something years, called me difficult, made me believe I was the family's problem. She bit her lip. A tear slid down her cheek. I was wrong. There's no excuse. Every year I meant to tell you, but I was scared. Scared to break the family. Scared to hurt you. Scared William would take everything. I convinced myself you were strong enough to get through it. That you were doing well. I turned away, looking at the people walking by outside the window. For years, I had traveled the world trying to understand why I was never truly loved. And the answer was sitting across from me all along. Then why are you telling me now? I asked, my voice hoarse. She placed a hand on the envelope. Because you deserve to know, not as a rejected daughter, but as a woman who has risen above a legacy of silence and denial. I looked down at her hand, trembling, honest, unarmed. Jonathan, is he still alive? She nodded. He started his own company in Austin, Texas, never married, and I don't think he knows about you. I never reached out. I nodded, picked up my now cold tea, set it down, and stood up. I'll find him, I said, because I need to know where I come from, not to fill a void, but to close a chapter. My mother reached for my hand. For the first time in years, I didn't pull away. Jasmine, she whispered, her voice trembling. Whether you forgive me or not, I'm proud of you. Not for your accomplishments, but because you didn't let the lies break you. I simply nodded, no smile, no tears. Because in that moment, I knew I didn't need another apology. I just needed to keep walking forward, on a path I could finally call my own. A week after meeting with my mother, I reopened the email, titled, Potential Biological Father Found. The sender was Jonathan Hale, currently living and working in Austin, Texas. In his first email, he didn't write much, just said that he had been notified by GeneLink, read the DNA profile, and it felt like a long-locked memory had suddenly been stirred. I don't know if I have any place in your life, but if Jasmine truly wants to meet, I'm willing. I read that line dozens of times before replying. I don't need a promise, I just need honesty. And clarity. 3 days later, I flew to Texas. We met at a vintage-style cafe in South Congress. He was already seated outside, wearing a gray button-down shirt and jeans. His hair was more than half gray, but his eyes weren't old. Those eyes looked uncannily like mine. I walked up, stood across from him. For the first few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he stood and held out his hand. Jasmine, he said, his voice low and slightly hoarse. It's good to meet you. I shook his hand. It was warm, steady. Unlike any hand that had ever landed on my shoulder with the intent to control. We talked for nearly 2 hours. About his college years with my mom, how they once planned to move to Oregon together, and how everything suddenly ended. About a letter he sent after summer break, and never got a reply. I thought, maybe your mom changed her mind, or her family didn't approve, but I never imagined she was pregnant. I nodded. I grew up not knowing anything, just feeling different, like I was always the outsider in a house where everyone else had keys except me. He sat quiet for a moment, then said softly, I'm not here to apologize for the past, because back then, I didn't have a choice. But I'd like a chance not to make the same mistake again. I looked up, and for the first time in my life, I heard an offer without conditions. In the weeks that followed, we gradually built a relationship. Not the perfect movie-like father-daughter bond, but two grown adults choosing to step into each other's lives with kindness, honesty, and no blind expectations. He invited me to visit his tech company, a firm specializing in financial security solutions for nonprofit organizations. Small, but effective. He didn't brag, didn't try to show he was successful like the men I once called father. We had lunch a few times each week, video called on Sunday nights. I slowly learned that he loved classic jazz, hated pineapple on pizza, and had never missed a single Austin Spurs basketball season. And he learned that I once studied piano for 3 years just to earn my stepfather's praise, only to quit after being told, "You play so badly, don't waste your time." He just smiled and said, "Next time you come to Austin, I want to hear you play." A few weeks later, I sold the Mercedes, the car that once symbolized a warped relationship. I used part of the money to enroll in an interior design course, a passion I had buried while chasing someone else's expectations. The rest, I invested in an education fund for children who grew up in cold households like mine. It didn't erase the past, but it helped me let go, no longer clutching shards of memory that only wounded me further. One day, while looking at the framed photo on my desk, me standing beside Jonathan at his company's product launch, I realized I had truly changed. Not because of status or compliments, but because I no longer needed recognition to feel like I existed. I'd found my own place, and I was solid enough for others to step in without shaking my foundation. My old family didn't become perfect. No one transformed overnight, but I had changed. I no longer tried to belong. I chose to be myself, with all the truth, the scars, and a heart that no longer needed to prove anything. That year, fall arrived late in New York. The leaves along Hudson Avenue turned brilliant colors, as if the entire city was walking with me into a new chapter, quiet, but full of intention. I parked near a familiar old bookstore in West Village. In my bag was a freshly finished manuscript, my first draft of No Permission Needed to Exist, where I told my story not to accuse, but to free. For myself, and for anyone who had ever lived in the shadow of lifelong silence. I started visiting my mom more often, not to patch up the broken past, but to understand her. As a person, not the perfect mother I once longed for. We took walks in the park on weekends, sometimes cooked together, talked about little things, the wine she liked, the novel she was reading, the documentary that made her cry. One day I asked, "Do you think if you had stood your ground back then, things would been different?" She looked off into the distance and said, "Baby, but back then I wasn't as strong as you are now, and I'm grateful that you didn't repeat my mistakes." That answer didn't erase all the hurt, but it opened something new, the possibility that love could start again if we looked at each other with eyes that no longer demanded. And Sophia, my sister, the one caught between loyalty and silence, surprised me the most. She showed up one Saturday afternoon, unannounced, holding a paper bag of almond cookies, the kind I used to love as a kid but had long forgotten. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner," she said plainly. "Not because I didn't know, but because I was afraid of losing the family. Until I realized I had already lost you." I smiled, took a bite of the cookie. Nutty, sweet, and full of memory. From that day on, we started over. Not as sisters, compared by others, but as two women learning how to stand for each other. I also went back to therapy. Not because I was weak, but because I understood that healing isn't a destination, it's a continuous journey. I started opening up more, with friends, with colleagues, with those who once thought I was the picture of perfection. I shared how there are still nights when I dream of my stepfather calling me a failure, and wake up with my hands clenched so tightly they hurt. But I also shared that I've learned how to let go. Close to Christmas, I received a package from Texas. Inside was a handwritten card from my biological father, Jonathan Hale. "I don't regret meeting you late in life. I only regret not being able to take you to piano class back then, or walk with you by the lake on summer evenings. But if you'll let me, I hope to be part of your life moving forward. Add the card to my chest. Because I know now, family doesn't always begin the day we're born. Sometimes it begins when someone chooses to stay. Without obligation, without title. Just truth and real care. One late afternoon at the end of the year, I walked along the High Line with Alyssa, my youngest sister, who had always stood by me. She turned to me and asked, "If you could go back and change one thing, what would it be?" I stayed quiet for a moment, then replied, "Nothing, because without those things, I wouldn't know who truly stayed." I reached for her hand and we both laughed in the crisp December air. My family never returned to what it once was. William Carter, the man who once shared my last name, never reached out again. Brandon, my brother, remained silent, choosing power over truth. But I have another family now, my mother, now honest and sincere, Sophia, who learned to love her sister beyond achievements. Elisa, who never gave up on me. Jonathan, my biological father, who stepped in when every lie had finally crumbled. And most importantly, I have myself. No longer the child who once trembled outside her father's office. No longer the woman who gave away a luxury car just to earn a cold nod. But a whole Jasmine Carter who no longer needs permission to shine. Real family isn't just blood. It's the people who see you clearly and still choose to stay. And that's what I carry with me, always. Jasmine Carter's story is a powerful reminder that true worth doesn't come from bloodlines or forced validation. It comes from the courage to face the truth and the choice to live authentically. In real life, we can't choose where we're born, but we can always choose how we move forward. Family isn't always where we begin. It's the people willing to truly see us and still choose to stay. What do you think about Jasmine's journey and her brave choices? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more moving stories and deep lessons about family, truth, and freedom.